Welcome to Crash Course in Commercial Real Estate. We converted our in-house training program to a podcast to teach you prospecting, negotiation, business planning, and other fundamental skills to become a successful commercial real estate agent. And now, here's your host, Brady Collier.
Okay, welcome back. In case you haven't joined us, I'm Brady Collier. I'm a broker in Lubbock, Texas with NAI, and we are training Shannon Powell in how to sell commercial real estate. So today I have Joe Magby here. He's in our office, and we are talking about the process of getting listings. And so this is episode 2, so you should have already watched episode 1 for everything here to make sense. Joe, let's just jump straight in. In the last meeting, we did pre-meeting research, calling to set the meeting and setting expectations on the call, meeting the owner, and touring the property. So those were the 3. Was there anything there that you wanted clarity on? Okay, no, I'll just keep going for time's sake. So now we've met the owner. We've said, hey, we've set a time with the owner to come to the office and to do the presentation. The reason you want to do that at the office, if you can, is, first of all, we put a ton of money into our office. And so if you're going out and looking at an industrial property or whatever it may be, they can't picture you working on their property because they don't know where you work. But when they walk into our door and they see the glass and the conference room and they look around the corner and they see your work, okay, now here's where Shannon's going to be working for me. And you're going to bring the presentation up. You got a physical copy. You're going to bring it up. You're going to offer them a drink. They're going to see the staff. You're going to introduce them to other people in the office that may assist or so on and so forth. And so part of it is the presentation of you and the capabilities of your company to serve them well. If you do it all on site and you just take the listing agreement, it's all a one-time meeting, they don't become convinced they're in good hands. And so every point in this process, in the first video, we talked about establishing your credibility by doing pre-meeting research and knowing a lot about the asset. You're further establishing credibility during the office with all these other agents, productive workspace, so on and so forth. It's not you working out of your house in your back bedroom, because some realtors, you laugh at that, but some brokers, one-man shop, no staff, no support, no assets behind them, no workplace. And the fact is, to service a lot of these listings, if you're showing a buyer or so on and so forth, they're going to come to your office to meet you. And so the client who's listing the asset with you, what is the buyer experience going to be like if they call Shannon? And so I think that's important to get them to your office.
It's that idea of trust. It establishes trust right out of the gate of, yeah, I can trust Shannon with this high dollar asset of mine, and that I'm in good hands with this because obviously they take really good care of their own stuff. Obviously they have a lot of experience, or they have a lot of gravitas around, and we try to make it look like that around the office, at least look like that. But and so it works really well in your favor that way. It just sets up them at ease of, I'm in good hands. I know Shannon's going to take really good care of what I'm doing.
Okay, so you've had the meeting, you've set the expectations. It's going to be at the office. You're going to come back to the office, and this is my step 4, and that is post-meeting research to prepare your listing presentation. And so there's a lot there in the research phase. You've done some preliminary research, but it was only you're going to be very busy. You're going to have a lot of things going on. So before you go to that meeting, you may only have 30 minutes to prep for that meeting. Tax roll, a few comps that are sold. You're looking in Crexie or LoopNet or whatever to see what things are listed for around there. So you may have 20 minutes. But then after you've had that meeting, you're going to go back to the office. You got to set aside some time because you have to nail the pricing. It's important to your client. It's important to the fact that you get the listing to move off the market. So if you miss pricing, if you miss something, that's going to bite you. So you got to set aside some time to do the post-meeting research to prepare your listing material. Okay, so in that research, Joe, what things are we going to dig into more deeply to accurately price the property and take it to the market?
You're going to dig in. So you have your comps. So you're going to dig into the ages of those assets. So now okay, this one over here on A Street sold for X amount of dollars per square foot. Okay, well, what was that? What did that look like versus what I now know about this asset that I'm going to price? This had a X amount of square feet, but it had all of these roll-up doors, or this had this much office versus this much warehouse, whereas this new one that I've got has this much office. And so you're comparing them much more in detail, but then you're also looking at marketing time as well, and you're saying, okay, how long was this one and this one and this one on the market for? When did it sell?
That's a great point, because if you're dealing with a downtown office space that's in our market 30,000 feet, and you're looking back and those took 300 days to get those things leased, you need to be aware of that. If you're looking at if things have cleared the inventory, cleared the shelf in 15 days, you need to be aware of that. So, because if it's a long time to clear, it may be really niche. You need to tell your seller, hey, sometimes these things are taking over a year. You always want to set their expectation. If it's taking 300 days, tell them it's taking over a year, so you're a hero when you move it in 300 days. So setting expectations on timing was really good. Joe, all of the comps you've been talking about were all sold or leased prior inventory. But I think it's also important to look at the current inventory on the market. And Shannon, if you're working with a seller on the market, to bring their asset to the market, you look at all the comps to get accurate pricing. Why would you want to go and look at other buildings that are currently on the market?
Competition.
Because it's the competition for your listing. That's exactly right. Any realtor who is showing your building is going to, if they're capable at all, is going to show 3 or 4 other buildings. Even if your building is the best, they want to show that your building is the best by showing other buildings that aren't as good and aren't priced as well, doesn't fit the client's needs. So if you don't know the competition, you need to tell your client, here's the sold comps, here's the comps that are on the market and what they're on the market for. We have to outposition them if you're in a hurry. If you're not in a hurry and you have time, then we can price right where they're at or even higher. And so that teases out of your client what are their expectations on timing and price, because timing and price is like two sides of a seesaw. You can have price, you can have timing, but to get both, that's ambitious.
That's the magic number. So, and it's kind of one of those, setting that expectation of saying, here's where we're thinking we would price this asset, and then if you gauge their response to that, and then you say this is based off of this much marketing time, and allow them to respond to some of those things, then suddenly, again, expectations are really clear in your mind of, oh, hey, actually we need to move this like yesterday because X, Y, and Z is happening internally in our company, and so we need to get this asset off of our books. Okay, well, if that's the case, then I would advise we do this instead of, well, we'll just see what happens. It just makes you that much more of a powerhouse for your clients, where you can again set that expectation of saying, well, hey, this could take X amount of time, but if we're comfortable with that, then I'm more than happy to work this thing. And obviously we're going to try to beat those expectations, but just want you to know exactly what's going on here. Yeah.
What makes Sherlock Holmes such a great detective? Did you ever watch any Sherlock Holmes?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Joe, did you ever watch Sherlock Holmes?
I did. Yeah.
The new ones, the really cool modern ones?
Yeah. Benedict.
What makes Sherlock Holmes amazing?
Attention to detail.
His attention to detail. He sees the little white chalk on the sleeve, and he figures out this whole thing based on the eyes being dilated plus the white chalk, and he solved the whole thing, and nobody else could see it because he pays attention to the details. And when you're doing the market research, you got to be like Sherlock Holmes. You got to know all of those details. You got to know them really well so that you can ask your client the right questions to make sure your services, your client expectations, and the market are all in alignment. Otherwise, you could be signing yourself for 6 months of misery if your client has unrealistic expectations. And the only way you're going to know that is to really research the market well. Now, Joe, so far on the research, we've only been talking about taking assets to the market that are for sale, and we've been picturing vacant space. But there's a whole other asset class that's across actually a lot of asset classes, types of asset, and those are leased assets. So if it's a property that's leased, you're not just looking at time on the market and so on and so forth. What are the other details that you're doing a deep dive in if it's an asset that's already leased?
You want to know everything about the lease. You want to know everything about the actual. I'm laughing at this because we ran into this past listing, but you want to know everything that you can about the lease. How is that structured? Is it a triple net? Is it a double net? Is it an absolute net, or is it just a modified gross lease? How are the expenses of the asset getting paid for? All that's going to come into play when you take the asset to the market, because every investor or every buyer is going to be asking those questions as well. As far as, if I put X amount of dollars into this building I'm going to buy, how does the rent get paid? How does the property taxes get paid? How do the common area maintenance costs get paid? All of those things come into play because it's going to affect your cap rate, or it's going to affect your pricing again on the thing.
So you do a deep dive into the property, you do a deep dive into the comps, And if it's a leased asset, it's an income producing, because there's owner occupied buildings and there's income producing buildings that are occupied by tenants. And on those, you got to do a deep dive into the financials to summarize everything he just said. Financials, the income and the expenses. So you got to do that. So we talked about continuous education. We talked about CCIM, really understanding cash flow, because it's also competitive. Anybody who's buying that property to get income could put that money into multiple other places. So you have to present a really accurate picture of the financial status of that building. And in both of these, whether a vacant building for an owner occupant or a leased building for an investor, you have to get into the mind of the buyer who is going to be making offers and say, what are they going to want to know and how are they going to view my listing, so that you can position the property well on a competitive basis against everything else out there and educate your client on what the market looks like. So for example, he just mentioned cap rates. The financial analysis, you're going to look at comps on a vacant building of what's sold on a price per foot basis. But if it's a leased asset, you're going to go back through, and this may be nationwide comps. You're going to go pull things in similar size markets. You're going to look at Abilene, Amarillo, Wichita, Kansas, whatever it may be, and say what cap rate did these things, so that you can set an accurate cap rate expectation for your seller. So I'll summarize all of that by doing a strong financial analysis to show your pricing, and your pricing is going to be determined by all of those things. So that's what I put. That was my fourth one, and that was research. I'm going to move on to my fifth one, unless you had any other comments on the research side.
I was just going to say that's why. So we talked about in step 3 how important it is when you're there on site to get as much information as you can. All of that comes into that fourth step in a huge way, but it also is going to be a bigger deal as you take something to market. The more you know, the more dangerous you are for your client. So all that's going to come into play. So get as many details answered, as many questions answered as you possibly can at that first meeting, or get as much information as you can, appraisals, environmental inspections, surveys, all those things, so that when you do your research, you actually know what you're looking for and what you're going to compare this to.
He just mentioned another interesting I haven't addressed yet, survey. Do you have a survey on the property? And I recently sold a building to an investor, brilliant guy out of Dallas, and he wants to buy this. And when we got to the survey, in the due diligence, it turns out the alley was separately owned, and it was a critical part of our redevelopment strategy. And we didn't find it until the due diligence. So you're going to get information in stages. There's going to be information you get prior to meeting the owner, after meeting the owner, from the owner. And then once you list it, in case there was any kind of confidentiality they wanted to maintain, after they list it, no holds bar, you've got to have everything that you can get your hands on to answer objections of the buyer. Because the buyer's going to be like, well, da-da-da-da. But the more information you have, you can overcome those objections to show them why the asset has a certain value.
We had something with that where our guys had an asbestos report on a building that had been built in the 60s, and he already had that handy to be able to say, well, we don't have any asbestos. And so that was critical down the road with the buyer, where he was saying, well, it's built in the 60s, so it's probably got asbestos. Nope, we got that report.
I've got a clean bill of health. Bam.
No problem.
Yeah.
So I mean that justifies your pricing. So someone says, well, we could knock X amount of dollars off the top for the asbestos. No, we don't have that. Boom.
Already done the abatement.
Already did that.
I'm going to move on to number 5. You've pre-meeting research. You called to set the meeting. You met the owner. You did your post tour research to do your pricing. Now you're actually going to build the presentation, and that is one that it determines that the client that you're working for determines what type of presentation you're going to build and what type of presentation you're going to make. Joe, present 2 extremes, if you can, on the types of clients and what their expectations would be on a listing presentation. Give me 2 very different extremes that you and I have encountered together, perhaps.
I would see the one extreme would be the super detailed. I want to see every last little thing that you've looked at. I want to see all the comps. I want to see just everything that you've got on how you came to that price. I want to see your update template. I want to see your lease template. I want to see your contract template. I want to see every last little thing. I think that would be on the one extreme.
Okay, let me speak to that extreme before you go to the other one. We've done listing presentations for Texas Tech University. We've done them for Mace Rich, who owns the $1.1 million square foot mall that Joe has on the market. And when you're dealing with a ginormous corporate entity out of Los Angeles and Phoenix, or if you're dealing with a Texas Tech institutional type owner, those listing presentations are a beast because they have your qualifications, they have the qualifications of your company, similar asset and your work on similar assets. So it's super intense. You agree with that?
Yes, very intense, especially when you've only been in the business for 4 months and you are the only person on the call.
And Joe says that because me and Kyle, we talked to Maestrich about listing the small, and we went through this whole dog and pony show with them. Well, we had a follow-up call, and Kyle and I forgot, and Joe was on the call, and he has all the corporate executives of a major mall owner in the United States. And Joe's been in the business just a little longer than you have now. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to wing this. What? And then at the very last minute, I jump on the call, and Joe's like,
save me. I was shaking like a leaf.
That's why
it was bad.
That's why I said that.
Anyway.
Okay, so that's one extreme, Joe. Let's get back to it. What's the other extreme?
The other extreme would just be the, real simple. Yeah, when you get it figured out, just send me a listing agreement. I'll look it over.
Yeah, it's a mom and pop local owner, no experience in commercial real estate, low expectations, and you've forgotten more about commercial real estate than they're ever going to know. They just bought this one little building so they could operate their business. They're done operating their business. They just want it sold. We recently had a deal where Joe took a property to the market, and the seller had unbelievably low expectations on a net leased asset that Joe took to the market, and they didn't know what their asset was worth. No big dog and pony show to take it to the market. It was super easy to list it. He took it to the market, sold it for double what their expectations were, something like that. So there are those that are really, really easy. There are those that are super difficult. I'm working on one right now. The process has been like 3 months to get an assignment because it's institutional grade, and it's everything in between. So you're going to need a listing template, which has, here's information about me and my company. Here's information about your property. And then in your presentation, you're going to have some information about how it's going to go to the market. You're going to talk about your marketing systems and process, and that's stock information that you're going to have in there. That it's the same for everybody. And if you go back and watch our marketing video with Amanda Tolley, in your presentation, you're going to say we utilize these. And all you have to customize is if it's not one that you can afford to do LoopNet on, or it's not the best avenue, you just go in and delete that and use Crexy and NAI's website and whatever. So there's going to be some customization. But the whole presentation is they may not sign the listing agreement at the table. They may need to go and take and discuss it with the heirs, the other people involved in the trust, the other people in the entity, with their wife. Well, that person doesn't know you. They don't hear your compelling story. So if they interview 3 people, your presentation has to be a good enough pitch packet on your services to beat your 2 competitors, because if they only gave a listing agreement and you have a well-prepared pitch presentation, when they say, well, this agent gave us this agent gave me this, and Shannon gave me this, and they're like, well, that's a no-brainer. That person's more capable than those people. So your presentation isn't just to guide the presentation process when they come to the office. It's also so they have something to take in case they don't make the decision at the table.
And it's also, be accurate, and then I don't like to say stand your ground, but if you know your pricing, hey, I'm solid on that this is worth $1 million, and someone else comes along and steals your listing because they said that they can sell it for 1.2, okay, I'm confident knowing that I can sleep at night, that I did a good job on this thing, because later on these guys are probably going to, if you're accurate, then they're going to sell it for a haircut off of whatever they just told their client they were going to do it for. So, stand your ground with that. And so sometimes, a lot of times, you'll get folks that they want all the pretty pictures and they want all this stuff, but really what they're really interested in is this bottom line number. That's what is the actual, what's the X value? And that's where step 4 really comes in, as far as knowing the asset and knowing the pricing and having done the research where that is accurate. I can stake my name and my reputation on that number.
To the point where if you're not willing to do it at this number, maybe I'll go a little higher and take it to the market and let the market give you feedback your asset's not worth what you think it is. But if you go way beyond that, I'd rather you just probably take your business elsewhere, because I'm only taking assets to the market that are well priced and positioned to sell. I'm not in the business of having things out there for years and years and years and years. Bad for owners, bad for me, bad for relationships. There's some assets that need to be out there for years. A lot of them don't, and you want to really focus on that pricing heavy. Okay, that is building your presentation. We have templates. NAI provides a lot of templates, and so Amanda can show you where to get those for your presentation, and Amanda does some customization on those just to make it really pop. And so when you have questions on that, you can ask me. You can talk to Amanda. I want to move, for time's sake, to the last thing, and that is the actual presentation to the owner. So I won't go back through the previous 5, but all of that is leading to when you're sitting across from an owner and you're giving them the presentation. And that may be that you want to control that in your office to where the presentation is going to be on the TV screen for progressive revelation, because if you hand them the whole packet the whole time you're talking, they're listening to flip through to find the actual price. But in the presentation to the owner, you have to discuss the pricing. You have to set expectations on timing. So you're the market, velocity, timing, pricing. And then something that always comes up in the negotiation, and this is a really odd business we mentioned in negotiation, because at this point you're going to be sitting across from an owner and you're about to negotiate something. And then 10 minutes later, when they sign your listing agreement, you're going to be negotiating on their behalf for the rest of your relationship. Joe, during the presentation to the owner, what's going to come up as a means of negotiation, as terms of negotiation between you and the seller?
You mean as far as, it's always going to be about price. It's going to be the key thing, but it's also going to be about
it's price.
Yeah.
And how about your commission?
Commission, yeah, definitely.
Does that come up in listing presentations?
All the time.
Every time.
All the time.
Because on there it's going to say, well, what am I going to pay you to take my asset to the market? And say it's a $2 million asset, and you're just going to confidently put in the very back, here's my listing agreement. It's going to be in the back of your presentation, your pitch packet, and you're already going to have it filled out with the entity name, this person to execute. And you may not have pricing filled out because you may want to write that in after you have the discussion. You may not have time, 6 months, a year, because you may want to have that conversation. Higher price, longer listing period, so that way the market can give feedback. But at the back of that thing, it's always going to be, I, owner, am going to pay you, Shannon, actually you, NAI, of which Shannon is an agent, X dollars in commission. You're going to be like, this is a $2 million asset. You're charging me 6%. And you got to be prepared in the listing presentation to defend your fee.
Yeah. And that some of that comes up. You lay the groundwork when you're doing your listing presentation. What you're telling them is what you're going to do for them and how you're going to earn that when it comes down to that, whatever that percentage is. This is how I'm going to earn it. And so you're saying, we're going to put it on these listing websites, and we're going to send e-blasts to our X thousand amount of people in our database. We're going to be making this many phone calls. We're going to be really hitting it hard for this amount of time, and we're going to try to get this thing moved. And so you set all those expectations, and that way when that does come up at the end, well, would you do, this amount of percent, or would you, then you say, well, what this covers is really my time, which is going to be spent doing this and that and the other for you to get this thing sold.
And it doesn't just cover your time, but you're also going to say, I'm going to blast out to my network. I'm going to put on the, and you're going to say, and honestly, Mr. Seller, it's best for you if I find a buyer direct and I'm able to represent you and the buyer, because then there will not be any lack of clarity of communication between the buyer's feedback and for you. I'll serve as a channel to make sure there's very clear communication and a stress-free process through the negotiations. But oftentimes, one of my steps is going to be to blast out to the network of brokers, both in Lubbock and Texas and beyond. And if that's the case, then half of this fee is going to be going to other brokers. Now, if you cut the fee, I respect that. But if an agent from across town is looking at 2 buildings and one of them has a 2.5% fee and one of them has a 3% fee, and they're the same price, if you were in that broker's shoes, would you be tempted to show the one that had the bigger fee? So you can cut the fee. We can talk about cutting the fee. That's not always good for you as a seller, because you're going to cut a half a point on a $2 million deal. How much is it going to cost you on lost showings and not having full access to the market? So in commission negotiation, we're going to go through a lot on how you present that to the seller. And most of it's valid, genuine. If something's got a 1% fee and something's got a 3% fee to a buyer's agent, I guarantee you the 3% fee, because all those brokers, they're working to feed their family. So if 2 listings are about comparable, they're not even going to show the 1%. They're just going to show the 3% fee. So cooperation with other brokers is part of it. And then also you say, hey, if you need a cut rate broker, I can recommend several people in the market who may be willing to negotiate on the commission. I've got 15 listings I've got to service, and my time is worth something. So I'm just not going to negotiate down any lower than this right here. But then there'll be some listings where you're like, this thing's going to fly off the market. I'll do it. Or you may say, okay, I respect that, Mr. Seller. I tell you what I'll do. If I have to cooperate with another broker, then we'll do 6%, 3 and 3. But if I represent both sides, then I'll cut that down to 5%. That way, you pay less commission you get clearer communication, and it's less money, and that's reasonable. And you have some concession, but you already got to know what your concessions are in your commission when you go into this listing process. What is it worth for me to take this? And right now you're thinking, I'll take all the listings, just pay me whatever it is.
I was actually just thinking that. Like,
6 months from now,
2%
you're going to be
is
like,
better than
should
0%.
I use my time on that or not? And it's you interviewing them as much as them interviewing you, because there's a price where you just don't take assets to the market. There's even liability for us as a company. For every deal we do, we have errors and omissions insurance. And if you take cut rate commissions, in the end you get lawsuits. So we'll have a whole discussion about commission offline. But that also comes into the presentation to the owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's all the other little things that can come up as far as something you can also mention is this is setting expectations. But if I'm taking something to sell and and it's in a weird market or it's in a weird spot where do you want me to show you everything, or do you want me to show you just stuff that comes in above and beyond a certain price point? That came up on one listing that we did out in La Mesa, where it was, hey, we're going to take it out at this, but if we get something for this amount, do you want me to even entertain that or no? That sort of sets expectations as well, because you're going to get those where someone calls in and says, well, I wouldn't pay that, but I'll pay a quarter of whatever you just took it out for. Then again, you're standing your ground and saying, no, this is the price, this is the accurate price that we put together for it.
And you have to, by law, take every offer, bona fide offer, to your seller. But if your seller said, hey, this asset's listed at $2 million, if it's below $1.5 million, don't even bring it to me. And then you tell the buyer's agent, hey, I've been instructed not to even bring offers below $1.5 million. So either strengthen your offer, or respectfully, you can find another asset or whatever. So I'm going to move to another one. It's either they're going to take your presentation, go think about it, sign the listing agreement, email it back to you. Or at times they're going to be like, okay, this all looks great, Shannon. And they're going to take the listing agreement that you've got, and they're going to get ready to sign it. The moment they sign that, you're going to go, the entire process I've been telling you, you're setting expectations for the next stage of this process to where you're guiding expectations. If they sign that listing agreement, hey, I'm so excited to work for you. Let me just tell you what the next 30 days is going to look like. Okay, I'm going to take this agreement, I'm going to give it to the staff, and we're going to start our marketing checklist. And on that, here's the ways that we're going to market the property. I just told you about them in the agreement, in the presentation. But it's going to get the signage. I told you we're going to put a sign up. It normally takes us up to 2 weeks to get our sign vendor to produce your sign and deliver it to site. Why is that important?
Because otherwise they're going to call you in a week and go, hey, you said you were going to get a sign out there. I still don't see it out there. What's going on?
And you don't want to start your relationship with unfulfilled expectations that were always unrealistic. So you're guiding the expectation process. When you tell them it's going to take 14 days, oh, okay. They didn't know their expectation was 2 days later there's going to be a sign on my property. But when it wasn't up, then you know. But so if you set the expectation 14 days, we're going to have it into LoopNet within this period of time. I need to send the marketing staff out to your property and schedule that with the property manager or whatever it may be to take pictures, because before we can produce our marketing flyer, we have to have those pictures. So you have to go through, now we've inked the agreement, let's DTR. I want to tell you all about how our relationship is going to look over the next 60 days. I'm going to give you a monthly listing report with all of the activity, and you're going to receive that a month from today, and you can review what things we've done and when we did them. Why do you tell them you're going to give them a listing activity report?
Because, they're going to, better to tell them and then do it than to not tell them and then they don't get one, or they're not sure when it's supposed to come, or it's,
and then they call you every single week. What did you do for me this week on my listing? Yeah. Don't do that. Yeah. Don't live that life.
Set that expectation right out of the gate, because there are some folks, and I just had one where, hey, our folks are going to want, a listing update every week. And I like to say, I think you'd rather me talking to buyers and not talking to you for an hour every week, telling you about the buyers that I want to talk to.
And say, hey, I have 14 listings. That's good for you, because people are going to call them my other listings that are a good fit for your listing. And I'm going to, if that listing's not a good fit for them, I'm getting more calls because I have a lot of listings on the market, and I'm going to take those. But I also have to service those other 14 listings well, because all of my clients are important to me. Oh, okay. She's not my personal bondservant working only on my one property, and nor would they want an agent who didn't have anything else going, because successful agents have a lot of signs, a lot of listings, and you field more calls, and you just put the buyers with the sellers. what's best for both parties. So you're setting expectations, and if you have questions on that, hey, I got a listing presentation tomorrow, what all is going to happen over the next 30 days, then we can go through detail by detail, play by play, to where you set those expectations and then exceed those expectations. Expectations minus reality is disappointment. You can't always change reality, but you can change expectations. And so if their expectations are insane and this is reality, you have to bring their expectations down to reality from the beginning so that you have a good relationship with your sellers or with your landlords or whomever you're representing. So that's my list. It's a lot. But every listing is worth every dollar and all the time. And you're going to get into a thing where this just comes naturally to you. And you'll just do all of these steps, very naturally. And you're going to have done it several times. So you'll take your former listing agreement and your former listing pitch packet, and you'll pull it out and you'll just modify it and update it for the new one. So it gets easier every one that you do. And we're going to work with you on your first several. And
I also say another word to the wise is like, when you have this process in place, try not to skip corners on it because, like Brady said earlier, that if you get, as you get more and more listings, then it can get tempting to sort of say, yeah, I'll just list that without going and seeing it. Or, yeah, I'll just take your referral client without ever actually talking to them or meeting with them. Or you'll just, it's tempting to skip the corners and cut the corners a little bit. Stay true to that form because it's just going to be so much easier down the road. And you're going to have less opportunities where you have these listings that you just hate yourself going to work because it's like, oh, I just can't get anything to move because I priced all these things wrong, or because I have these clients that are constantly haranguing me about, hey, what's going on or not going on with my stuff. It just makes your life a whole lot less stressful.
What Joe's saying in summary is pay now or pay later. I'd rather you pay now with doing the process right than pay later through stress and pressure, and because you didn't pay. You can pay a few hours up front and have a great relationship for 6 months, or skip some of these steps and then pay for it for 6 long months, and life's too short for that. So be a professional. I think this is a professional process. You got any feedback, thoughts, questions?
No, the only thing I'm most nervous about is, besides all of it, is pricing correctly. I mean, in the beginning, do you work with a team to do those things? Okay.
On your first listing presentation, we're going to do every single step of this with you. And I'm even going to go to the listing presentation, and went to that one with Joe and Kyle. And then one of the guys at Mace Rich came back and he's like, hey, Brady, because I was on a call. He's like, hey, fancy meeting you on this call. I saw you at the listing presentation and I haven't seen you for the last 3 months. And I was like, that's because Joe and Kyle are doing all the work. And so on your first several listing presentations, we're going to work through it together, and I'm going to go with you to win the assignment, and then you're just going to service the assignment. And if it's not me going with you, maybe you grab Joe or Kyle, you co-op your first couple of deals. There's lots of ways you can learn that process to where it feels very comfortable. You don't have to be a lone ranger on that.
Good.
All right.
You can do great.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining.